ability, refined as time goes on. Our perspective gets refined. It's one of the great things of growing older. You get a much more refined perspective on life than you had when you were 20, 30, 40, 50, or even 60 or on. And enlightening like you wouldn't believe. Let's try and keep all things in perspective. So Ecclesiastes is a book about perspective. It's a book that will help us have perspective on life. I believe that's why God put it in here. So with that in mind, we're going to go to a passage. It's probably my single favorite passage. Ecclesiastes 9 is what we want in the book of Ecclesiastes. And you're going to go, after we read this, you're going to go, there is something wrong with him. That's his favorite passage in Ecclesiastes. But again, you have to ponder it. You have to meditate on it. And you have to understand why God has given us the book. And I didn't have a marker in here. So we want Ecclesiastes 9. And then we're going to add a passage back in chapter 8 to it. Okay, we want to start in verse 11 of Ecclesiastes 9. Remember, we're talking about perspective. And life under the sun, S-U-N, and life under the sun, S-O-N. I saw again under the sun, there's a phrase he uses repetitively, that the race is not to the swift, and the battle is not to the warriors, and neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to men of ability. For time and chance overtake them all. Now, let me stop for 1 second to favor to men of ability. During my missions trip to India, one of my discoveries among lots of others is that India is full, I mean full, of intelligent, competent people who have absolutely no chance on this planet. They are men of ability with no chance because they don't have a government that works for them. They don't have a culture that works for them. That's why they want to come to America where they have a chance. And so if we think about that for 2 seconds even, we can think through places on this planet, countries where people don't have a chance, really, unless they get out of that country. Because nothing's going to change in the country they're in. And so, nor favor to men of ability, for time and chance overtake them all. Moreover, man does not know his time. Like fish caught in a treacherous net and birds trapped in a snare, so the sons of men are ensnared in an evil time when it suddenly falls upon them. So you're going, man, there's something wrong with Barry if that's his favorite passage. Well, back up to chapter 8. Back up to chapter 8. And we want to look at verses 7 and 8 here in this. 7 and 8 go. If no one knows what will happen, who can tell him when it will happen? No man has authority to restrain the wind with the wind, or authority over the day of death, and there is no discharge in the time of war, and evil will not deliver those who practice it. And so we pay attention here. What he says is that no one knows what will happen, no one knows when it will happen, and no one has any control over it whatsoever. Got that? That describes life on this planet. This planet is a treacherous place. The former president of Moody Bible Institute called it, we are a fallen race in a fallen place. This world is not a good place. It's a treacherous place where no one knows what will happen, when it will happen, and absolutely no control. Now, here in this thing we just read on perspective for American citizens only, I could just put so much more stuff in here because in this same time period, Joseph Stalin is doing what he's doing in Russia, and while he's doing what he's doing, 50 million people are going to die because of Joseph Stalin. while he's doing that, Mao Zedong is doing what he's doing in China, and 30 million people are going to die. And you can just go right through the history, all other places on the planet, and bad stuff is happening to people. Now, one thing that ought to happen, if we get a little bit of perspective on this, is you and I should spend a whole lot of time down on our knees thanking God we were born in America, which may be the greatest planet, or greatest country that's ever existed on this planet, and we may have lived during the best time this country has ever seen. The people that lived in America in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s up through now may have lived in the best period this country has ever seen, because it's totally different than other parts of the time of the country. So, I hope this is not too much of a downer, but it's perspective. It's perspective on life where we happen to live, America, and for anybody else in the country, it will be perspective on who they are and where they live. The perspective goes on, obviously. We have to throw God into it, life under the sun, S-U-N, and then life under the sun, which amplifies the perspective, which Ecclesiastes, Koheleth, will get to. So, let's back to the four-part outline, which takes us back to page 2. And here's our four-part outline of Ecclesiastes that we're going to work on. Number 1, no human enterprise under the sun in normal life is sufficient to meet our life needs. That's because we're a fallen race in a fallen place. And stuff is not going to go well in a fallen race in a fallen place. Stated with great simplicity, this is one of the most apparent and also one of the most unwelcome comments in the book. To prove his point, Koheleth outlines 4 human enterprises. Now, let's stop there for a second. You know why people are so unhappy in this world, even if they're Americans and have the best life possible? Because this life is never designed after the fall to meet our life needs. It just isn't going to happen. It's going to meet some of them, and we're going to have some happiness and some joy and some meaningful parts of life, but it was nothing in this life is designed to meet our life needs. And so he outlines 4 arenas of that. The first one is knowledge, and knowledge, learning, education, wisdom. It's not going to meet our life needs. And the emptiness of things. Things are not going to meet our life needs. Fun is not going to meet our life needs. And personal importance is not going to meet our life needs. So those 4 fall into the category of no human enterprise under the sun is sufficient to meet our life needs. So let's just take a minute here and talk about the grief that comes with knowledge. And we want to go back again to our Bibles and Ecclesiastes. It would help if I left my marker in Ecclesiastes. That way I can get back to it quick. Okay. We want Ecclesiastes chapter 1. I'm going to start in the beginning here where the book starts. By the way, since we're right there, I will get there in a minute. We want to start at verse 13. We'll start at verse 12. I, Koheleth, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. So there's no doubt who wrote the book. And I set my mind to seek and explore by wisdom concerning all that has been done under heaven, all human behavior, all governmental behavior, all acts of God. It is a grievous task which God has given to the sons of men to be afflicted with. Notice what he said. Learning is a grievous task to be afflicted with. In fact, back here later in the book, it's this passage I like to give to students in the church periodically, like high school, junior high students. Solomon says, much learning is a weariness of the flesh. Tell your teacher that at school, would you please? That it comes from God. It comes directly from the Bible. Much learning is a weariness of the flesh. So anyway, here in chapter 1, he says it's a grievous task which God has given to the sons of men to be afflicted with. I have seen all the works which have been done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity or emptiness and striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. Now, okay, one of the things we want to do here is define our terms. Knowledge is the understanding of facts. Wisdom is the ability to use those facts in a beneficial way. Wisdom and knowledge are not the same thing. More than one person in our day and age has said in America we're educating people beyond their intelligence. And that is so true. Because you can have a head full of knowledge and absolutely no wisdom in how to use it. Or absolutely no wisdom in how to live life realistically and beneficially. So those are the terms. Those are the definitions. And I set my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I realized that this also is striving after wind. Now here's his clincher, his end analysis. Because in much wisdom there is much grief, and increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. He said, okay, this is a painful experience, the experience of learning. So the observation here that I've written out for you from this, the more one knows, the more his frustration increases, both by what he doesn't know and by the alarm from what he does know. You may not like this concept, but it's true of the enterprise in and of itself. So with much knowledge comes sort of a real frustration. I wish I didn't know this. Some stuff. I'd be better off if I were fat, dumb, and happy and didn't know a bunch of stuff that I know. And so that's what he's saying. And I have to do one little thing here. How many of you have paid attention to Taiwan in the news? Okay, all right. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and I said, okay, Taiwan didn't used to be Taiwan. Taiwan used to be the capital of an island called Formosa. And back during the 50s, a general named Chiang Kai-shek, who was called the president of Free China eventually, he was moving south out of China, being pushed by all the communists until he eventually came to the sea and went over to the island of Formosa. And he and all of his followers were called Free China, as opposed to Communist China. And so Communist China didn't pay much attention to Taiwan until over the decades they became rich and prosperous, and now they want Taiwan, which used to be the island of Formosa with its capital as Taiwan. And so in the Jimmy Carter era, Jimmy Carter decided we couldn't have two Chinas. And so he formulated the one China point of view, which is Communist China. And I forget what it's called, but the Senate and Congress didn't quite like that too well, so they wrote a letter of whatever. I forget what they called their letter. Like, we don't like this because this is free democratic China down here on the island of Formosa. And so that's how this whole thing came to be. Now, I have to take my usual blow at millennials here. Sorry about that if you happen to be a millennial. For millennials, history started the day they were born, as a general rule. Now, I've read the characteristics that are worldwide of millennials. Now, they don't apply to everyone. Like I was talking to Mandy Kaiko one day, and I had this list in my hands, this paper list of the characteristics of millennials. They're generalized. Not everyone that's a millennial has all the features. But one of the features is that generally they think history is totally worthless. There's no need of knowing anything about history because my life is my life right now, and that's all that's relevant, what is going on in the world right now. So you can't have perspective without history. That's why we're reading a book that's between 3,000 and 4,000 years old. There's perspective on this book, on life right here and now. So that's point number one of our four-part outline. Tell me how I'm doing on time, honey. Part 2.
It's 11:06. I think it goes to 11:45. Isn't that when the first second service ends?
Supposed to end. Mark never ends on time.